Welcome to Legacy Unscripted, the podcast where sports and business collide. I'm your host, Russ Katzman, and here we'll skip the fluff and get straight to the hustle. From athletes turned entrepreneurs to impact-driven business leaders, we dive into the wins, the lessons, and yes, some of the failures that make legacies worth living. No scripts, no filters, just raw, real conversations to inspire you to stop dreaming about your legacy and to start living it. Now let's get into it. Today we welcome Julie Fabsik-Swarts with Employee Assistance Professionals Association. Julie, good morning.
Good morning.
Why don't you give us just a couple minutes about who you are and what your purpose is?
Sure. So currently I hold the title of CEO of the Employee Assistance Professionals Association, and we work with the EAPs who are in almost 5 million workplaces in the U.S. and in almost 40 countries throughout the globe. Prior to that, or in addition to that, I should say, I am a nationally rated women's gymnastics judge. In fact, I did NCAA Gymnastics National Championships in Fort Worth last year. I also sit on the board of directors of U.S. Center for Safe Sport, hoping and helping to try and make our sports more safe and trying to get, quote, bad guys out of our sports arenas for our youth. Because if you remember some of the history, it was getting pretty bad. And other past positions, I was the head of U.S. Synchronized Swimming, now known as Artistic Swimming. At the time, it was known as USA Synchro. I also was the executive director of National Intercollegiate Soccer Officials Association, the SOA. There goes my phone.
That's all right.
I also was the head of National Intercollegiate Soccer Officials Association, known as NSOA, supporting collegiate soccer officials throughout their efforts in being the best official they can and calling the games as best they can. Other hats I've worn in my career, I was also the head of the National Postdoctoral Association for Early Career Researchers, and I've worked for 5 higher education institutions, including UC Berkeley, Penn State University, and Lock Haven University of Pennsylvania. Been some experience in youth, been some work in fundraising. I was the Chief Development Officer for Purple Heart Foundation, supporting veterans who have given sacrifice for our country.
I love it. You know, it's interesting because if you think back, if you kind of look at the thread of all of that as it goes through, it's all around helping quite a bit of helping youth, but just helping people in general. What is it about you that drives you to want to improve health and mental health and that kind of stuff for individuals?
Well, you know, from my own personal standpoint, I've had both friends and family members supported and even rescued by EAPs. EAPs are that person usually with a mental health background. A lot of them are social workers or counselors by training that work to try and, as we call it, a best corporate strategy. So not so much in the traditional way of thinking in terms of an HR benefit, like your medical benefits or your retirement, but a corporate strategy of keeping people in their job, decreasing turnover, decreasing sick time, and also increasing what we call presentism. How much are you present in your job and really paying attention and working for that? If you are, then your company's going to make more money, and the hope is that with the support of an EAP, you're going to live your best life, grow, be successful, and it's going to be a win-win across the board. Our folks are often really unsung heroes that do amazing work. I can talk about instances. One of our members is the head of an EAP for an airline, and I remember him telling us that he had to go to, I think it was Alabama, because one of the ground guides had misstepped, I believe, and was sucked through an engine in front of all of the people. Now think of the reaction to that. People who deal with the fallout from gun violence, which in the U.S. is still a reality. Or people might deal with a suicide, either on the job or with somebody that they're close to on the job. How do you deal with the fall of that? How do you deal with PTSD of that? And a lot of our EAPs are dealing with that on a regular basis. They also can help give training, resilience, support, in helping them deal with other issues such as addiction, not just alcohol, but narcotics, porn, gambling is becoming a huge problem. For all those people in the sports world, being aware of what's going on with the gambling industry is really important these days because it will affect workers, especially young males in the workforce. And its impact on sports is huge. So something to be aware of and have on your radar.
Well, and all of it is becoming so much more readily available to individuals as well through technology and apps and everything else. Talk to me then. I mean, I don't think there's anybody listening that would argue against the value of this. But what are the challenges you have in getting people to want to invest either corporate money or sponsorship money in pushing some of this forward?
So getting corporations to understand that EAPs will save them money, in fact, make them money in the long run, because they decrease that turnover rate. Because people are, if you're going through a divorce or you're struggling with being hungover or even just financial crisis, it's really you're more likely to pay attention to what you're doing in work, especially if you have a safety job. We often train, a program is called SAP, which is run by the Department of Transportation. I understand there's almost 100,000 truck drivers sidelined because they tested positive for drug or alcohol. And those individuals can help get them back on the road, help them deal with their issues and get them back on the road. The same thing falls for pilots, boat captains, and train engineers. They're all fall under that DOT head banner of safety. And if they come up positive in a drug or alcohol test, they could lose their job. So having those people there that can be that support system, and then if they need to get back on to work, those SAPs to help them resolve those issues.
Very nice. Now, what's the background for employee assistance professionals in the EAP Association? Has it been around for a while? Did you start this? Where did it come from?
So we're over 50 years old. The roots of the organization are in drug and alcohol addiction. That's just, I guess, the history of the U.S., but it has evolved into a variety of different things. We do have a partner in NADAC, which is now the Specialization Addiction Association. But our EAPs are very well trained in addiction and helping to get individuals to where they need to be, whatever that addiction is, whether it's in therapy, whether it's in maybe a special treatment center, whatever that issue is. Our folks are really well connected and are very knowledgeable of what's going on in their companies and their fields. So I hear right now it's 3 to 4 months if you go through your medical health insurance to try and get into a mental health professional, especially a psychiatrist. There's a real shortage out there. Whereas often our EAPs have enough relationships that they can respond and deal with and get people in where they need to be in a much quicker pace, usually within days. So it's a real winning situation. They've been criticized in the past of not having a high utilization rate. Let me tell you, first, during COVID, it was through the roof because we're not meant to be isolated and alone. The depression, the isolation, the loneliness was overwhelming. And I think COVID spread up the conversation that was destined to be had about mental health in the workplace. So young people today don't have the same stigma in their minds about mental health. They're negotiating my salary, my benefits package, and I want to know what you're doing for my mental health support. So having an EAP not only helps with a corporate strategy, but also supports that leader of tomorrow. So really, really important aspect. And I invite corporations to come to our website to get involved with us, as well as EAPs or potential EAPs. If you're interested in a career in this, we're looking for that next generation of EAPs to come get involved and grow their practice and grow their work, whether they're full-time into a company or they have their own practice.
Yeah. And we'll have to make sure we get your information in the show notes so that if they do want to come out and help you guys out, it's a perfect opportunity to do so. Yeah, you talk about the mental health in the workplace. I think that in the old days it was, we'll give you 2 weeks of vacation. Make sure you take your vacation time. That's your mental health break.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then we don't really let you take your vacation time either.
Yeah, just make sure it's not during our busy time.
Exactly.
So let's transition this just a little bit to the sports world and talk to me a little bit about what you've seen in gymnastics, as a judge and part, the participation you have in the sport in general, as well as what you had with some of the past positions you were in. What do you see from a mental health standpoint, either more or less in the sports world relative to what you're seeing in the business world for mental health?
Well, I think, again, the fallout from Larry Nassar in the gymnastics world, which was just groundbreaking and earth-shattering, having that happen, really changed the conversations about listening to athletes and what they needed. Li Young, who is the new CEO, really has emphasized, of USA Gymnastics, has emphasized that culture of athletes first. So there are a variety of new things in place and support systems happening, as well as Safe Sport has been doing a lot of work in training coaches, training officials, training parents, being there. It's a challenge. I don't know if most people realize, but football is coming into the Olympic arena. And it's going to be thousands and thousands of more athletes coming into that system. So when you bring in more athletes into a system, there's more likely going to be more investigations. Where those dollars are coming from for the organization to do things such as investigate issues that are brought up when there's a number of athletes involved, it's really a challenge. There's, the U.S. Olympic Committee funding, Paralympic and Olympic Committee funding is flat. And there is some Department of Justice money, but the pressures of politics of how that money can go up and down, and usually down. So they're struggling too. They're doing a great job, but it is very labor intensive, and you need to have a lot of legal experts on that team to make sure they're following the laws and working with law enforcement and the Department of Justice to make sure they're doing a good job. So challenges of the center for that. CEO Juris Colon is really trying amazing work, and they were actually in Paris, and then she said it was amazing how many athletes came up to them in Paris, not even all American. We are so much further forward in the U.S. than other countries. In fact, I just heard that Germany gymnastics is going through an upheaval much like we had a few years ago, with the athletes rebelling and saying, we need changes, starvation, training and competing on injuries. All those things are not acceptable. So that's a step in the positive direction that reckoning is coming. So I'm glad to see that. Really is a thought of what is best for the athlete in all sports. Also, the concussion issue, it's not just football, and then not just soccer for those who think of it in soccer, European football. Concussion protocols are rampant, need to be in place across the board. It's synchro. We had a huge number of concussions because those kids are under the water and you don't see it, but those legs are churning and they're getting together to throw an athlete up and they get kicked in the head. So there's a concussion issue. So,
you told me that.
Yeah, concussion issue in synchro. Athlete falls off. I'm also an official for what's called NACADA, National Collegiate Acrobatic and Tumbling Association. And NACADA, someone may fall, like in cheerleading, from a pyramid or a toss. Those concussions are there, and is there a protocol in place to make sure, that someone's not out there working with a concussion? NACADA has that in place. Gymnastics has that in place. Football and soccer now have that in place. But, it's an ongoing issue, and the research is crucial.
So I'm curious, and you can answer it if you want, but out of curiosity, the upheaval you talk about with us and now that we're seeing around the world, is this necessary because of a previous lack of oversight, or people kind of knew about it and it was kind of being ignored? I mean, how did we get here, I guess is kind of the question.
Well, I think for the U.S., gold medals were everything. When I started, the former head of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee said to me, we need to get those athletes on the medal stand. Not we need to make sure we're a good sport, or we want more kids in it, or we want more education programs. It was, we need to get them on that medal stand. That was the quest. We need to make sure that, that attitude is important, but it's not the only thing. It's good not everybody's going to be an Olympic champion. So for the 99.9% of athletes who are not Olympic champions, what did they get out of the sport? Do they feel positive about their experience? Do they want to bring their children back and grow the sport into the next generation? Do they feel like their time in the sport was worthwhile? It gave them life skill development. It gave them teamwork skills. I'd heard that there was a study done that athletes who participate in college D1, I think, level sports are, I forget what the number was, but a much higher percentage to be CEOs of corporations later on. So it gives them that leadership skills. It gives them goal setting, time management, all those things you want in an employee, you get when you have a good athletic program. So it's something to consider. The other issue in speaking on this topic is there's still an issue with Title IX. Last I heard, if you check Champion Women, run by Nancy Hogshead Maker, who is an Olympic gold medalist in swimming, talks about how there's $1 billion in scholarships not given to women, $1 billion in support and scholarships and support not given to NCAA women's athletes compared to men's, which means you have $1 billion less opportunities to be that CEO and develop those skill sets and that opportunity of what college sports brings to that table. So all these pertinent issues still going through the churn and the mixture of money, politics, media, and next generation.
Yeah, I found it interesting. I was speaking to an individual last week on a different pod, and he's associated with USA Bobsled and Skeleton. And he mentioned, and this was news to me, he mentioned that the U.S. does not fund those athletes and those sports, right? Those are all nonprofit organizations that run those, which means exposure for those sponsors, for those those nonprofits. Any sponsors, any exposure they can get is that much more important, because they can't just go turn it on to bring more revenue in, right? You've got to create exposure. Exposure brings sponsorship. Sponsorship brings the money in, and then we're able to do the things we want to do.
Well, it's also the haves and have-nots. You have your big sports like swimming and track and field, and then you have your bobsleds, your luges, your synchronized swimmers, your all those little guys, biathletes that they don't have those money, that income. They don't have the sponsorship quite in the same way a track athlete would have. So I know when I was at Synchro, we were paying through U.S. Olympic and Paralympic dollars, $500 a month stipend. I don't know about you, but that's a pretty hard deal to live on $500 a month. So in essence, money is a barrier for our best athletes to succeed. And if they don't have parental support, they don't succeed.
Now, do you see any Olympic or pre-Olympic athletes absorbing any NIL money?
We do have some. I don't know if you're familiar with Livy Dunn, who is a gymnast at LSU, which is, I believe she's the top female athlete in the NCAA receiving that NIL money. There's a great series, I want to say it's on Netflix or Prime maybe, on the money game. And really fascinating to see what the athletes are dealing with, because it isn't just free money. They're working it. They have to be posting. They have to be doing those. So you're not only juggling school and competing and training, but now you're adding a third component with this NIL aspect. It's great money for certain types. And some athletes will never, for whatever reason, whether it's not the right sport that catches fire, or, Livy is utilizing her sexuality to bring in those followers.
And to your point, she's in a high-profile sport.
She is.
And that helps as well.
It is.
So,
but, Jordan Childs has gone back to UCLA, back to hoping to see her this season. That brings in people, and she does a lot of opportunity out there. But this whole evolution of NIL will be interesting to see how it affects. Will it create another haves and have-nots? Revenue sports, non-revenue sports have created haves and have-nots. Now NIL is going to be about that. And now are we looking at different states, different universities? Are they helping? The whole Money Game documentary talked about LSU and their support of the NIL. If you're in a small school, you're not going to have that kind of support. So it would be interesting to see what evolves out of this, and that pay to play, the amateurism is truly gone.
Yeah. Well, the interesting part is the money now is going directly to the athlete. It's not coming to USA Gymnastics to support all the athletes. Now it's going to Livy or whomever, right?
Correct.
As an athlete instead. And so that's going to be another challenge for those supporting organizations to how do we support everyone else when the sponsor money is going specifically to certain individuals.
So, the funny part is that some of these coaches, especially in a smaller sport, may have an athlete that makes more money than they do. So how do you sit them down on the bench when they can buy and sell you, right? So how do you say you're not in the lineup or you're not competing in this game, even though it's good for their brand? It opens a whole new area of things that we have not thought of. And then legality.
It's tough enough when you get that. Tough enough when you get that. It's tough enough when you get that with older individuals that are professionals, right? That have gone through college and been playing and stuff for years, and they're making more money than their coach. Okay, fine. Maybe they have financial advisors to help them and that kind of stuff. But then you start getting a 14, 15, 16-year-old that's getting NIL money coming in, and it's just what do they do with it? Hopefully, they have good parents that can lead the way. And help them deal with some of that.
Absolutely. The other issue, especially for women, is we have not thought much about, we're promoting ourselves here. Look at all the rah-rah at the hotel. Well, Livy's dealing with stalkers. We had an incident at Utah last year that LSU started having to hire security. They can't just walk into a restaurant. They have to have security go and clear the restaurant. It's almost like being a presidential candidate, or clear the hotel. They got to be really careful about putting up where they're staying, or because you just never know what's going to happen. And don't think she can even go to class. I think she's online only because of the threat to. The documentary was really scary. That threats of, do your windows lock, and it's just really scary time. And especially women athletes and coaches really need to be aware of it, about how to properly promote without getting themselves stalked. It's a scary time of that.
Well, and without going down the rabbit hole too much, I think that's something that the younger generation doesn't understand. And even the younger generation, even older generation individuals who just crave that outside love or that outside adoration from being online and getting followers and stuff, right? What's the downside of having 5 million people following your every step and waiting on everything you say? Well, there's 5 million people out there that when you go to the store, they're waiting to see you.
Right. Right. If you watch Simone Biles Rising, you heard, she travels everywhere with 2 bodyguards. That's crazy. She can't stop at 7-Eleven and pick up a soda without potentially having an incident. And that's really a scary thought. And she's used to it. Obviously, some of those folks have gotten comfortable in that role, but it's to the average person who doesn't see that, it's a different way of life. It changes your thoughts. I have never aspired for fame because of exactly that.
Yeah. There's a certain privacy you sacrifice when you do that kind of thing. Well, good. I'm glad that there's some support structures in place for athletes, and of course, the average individual, whether they're a part of a work-life balance or something like that they're trying to work their way through. And that there's these employee assistance professionals that are there to help. So let's change gears just a little bit. I know when.
Sorry, but I Gotta accept
No, that's
love.
okay. So let's change gears a little bit. I know when you and I spoke, you mentioned that EAPA is a nonprofit organization. Talk to me about some of the challenges that creates for you.
So as a nonprofit, no one's getting rich. We are a small association, and most of our dollars come from either donations, grants, membership dollars, and education. We have an annual conference every year that moves around the U.S. at this point, and that keeps our small staff working and employed and keeps the lights on, so to speak. So, when someone's a volunteer, I sometimes can't pay for a speaker to come somewhere or a volunteer to get somewhere, because like the small NGB, they have limited budgets. They're also nonprofits. Also, boards of directors come and go. Some are outstanding. What people don't often realize, they hear board of directors, it's not board of directors of Coca-Cola. They're all volunteers. In fact, instead of us giving them money like a Coca-Cola, we actually ask them for a donation. So it's the opposite. When I serve at the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, I am doing it as a volunteer. I take time off from work on vacation time to go and do that. And I personally make a donation. So when I serve on my time at the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, I do it as a volunteer. I take time off vacation time to go and do a board meeting, and I make a personal donation to the organization, as does all my fellow board members. So almost all nonprofits are in that boat, where we rely on the expertise and the generosity and the support system of some amazing volunteers. And that's really crucial. And that's the backbone of nonprofit work in the U.S., whether you're in sports or helping children in your Girl Scouts or helping with an association. They're most volunteers on the board of directors.
Okay. So if you had somebody in front of you that said, I want to help, what are the top things you need from the average individual?
Well, right now, I think one of the biggest challenges we have is getting the word out of what an EAP is, what the difference they make, and helping to grow the next generation of leadership in the community. Getting people to understand what they are and how they can utilize them, and that they truly are unsung heroes. And that for CEOs, that they're a great corporate strategy. If you don't have an EAP, whether they can hire them on a part-time basis or contractual basis, they can do a lot of different things to get that effort in their organization. Also, I think mental health as a conversation is something that we just can't put it down. Oh, I love our vision is, our core values are. And then I just heard a story about a young woman who was an EAP who ended up getting dismissed from her company because she lived in a place where a hurricane was, and they had a hurricane warning. She took her child into the bathtub, and meanwhile was getting texts from her boss saying, why aren't you at your desk? Understanding we're human beings and we need to cut each other a break. It is perfectly okay for our team if someone says, I need a mental health day, including myself. That's all right. Does that happen at your place? Is there a system where someone can say, gee, you look like you're struggling with something. Do you have an EAP? Do you know about 988? Do you know that both SAMHSA and NAMI, National Association of Mental Illness, offer a free hotline for you to talk? If you need someone, if you don't have any other resources. I have been giving some webinars for USA Gymnastics about building support systems, not just for the physical injuries, but for mental health injuries. What do we know? What are the signs of suicide? Suicide is still a huge issue in the United States. Do you know what are you going to say if someone tells you I'm feeling suicidal? Maybe I'd be better off if I wasn't here. Everyone would be better off. What are you going to say? There are things to say and not to say. Well, they're starving in Turkey is not a good answer. Or suck it up, you'll get through it, which is the traditional coaching mentality. Just like my ankle hurts. Oh, you'll do better. Come on, you can get through it. That's not the answer. So making sure you have a team in place and a support system in place to address issues as athletes develop human being type of reality mental health issues. And then also helping someone who might come up and have a mental health disease, schizophrenia, bipolar disease, depression. These are all courses of human life, and we need to be able to support both athletes and employees who come up with these diseases and help them work and be successful in that role, even with those illnesses. The same way if you had cancer or a broken leg, we'd help you through those.
Yeah, and I think you touched on an important piece in there, which is the training of our leadership, right? I don't know that the average manager knows how to have those conversations. Now, that's two things about that. One, that's the very reason we have an EAP set up. Get into EAP programs so that you can refer them to the EAP as opposed to trying to conduct that conversation yourself. But the second part of that is getting those managers to recognize when the issues are there. What are the signs? What are the things that are being said? How do I know what's really going on with this person, or suspect that there's something more than what I'm hearing from them? I'm okay. Well, they may not be. And strongly recommending that they speak to somebody and speak to an EAP, a professional, et cetera.
And if you have an incident on your job, do you know if someone does commit suicide, whether at your work or at your sports team? Do you know every Major League Baseball team has an EAP? In fact, one of them is on my board of directors. Sports teams do this. Universities have EAPs. It is an accepted, great avenue to support employees of all different genres. And I think some of the challenges with smaller like NGBs is the funding is really limited. And I think that's something that maybe needs to be put out there and discussed and figured out ways to support both the staff and the athletes.
I agree. Now, I know, and I don't want to let you go without having an opportunity to talk about your book. I know you like to support parents, et cetera. Tell me about the book.
So this was a life stream. Check the box in your bucket list. It's called Parenting a Gymnast, and it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It is for parents who, see Simone Biles at the Olympics and say, I want my child to do that. All the mistakes my parents made when I was an athlete, because they didn't know better. They weren't dumb, or they weren't not trying. They just didn't have the resources. So this talks about how to keep your child safe, how to find the right gym that matches your philosophy, the things you should look for, what to expect, what are the costs, what is the culture, what does the competitions section look like. So it's a great resource for those who are interested in the sport of gymnastics, and a lot of the lessons that are in here are also transmittable to other sports in terms of thinking about what I'm looking for, philosophy development. Not every child will be an Olympian, but every child will get something out of a sport if it's approached correctly. So I hope folks will consider this. It's also a great aspect to have in your gym. As a reference, USA Gymnastics actually is endorsing it, and it's in their books for endorsement for gym owners, coaches, parents, and kids. So I hope people will consider that. I also have a lot of really cute stories from now going in 43 years of officiating. So lots of really great people. I also have some of my own pictures of Simone Biles and Suni Lee and some of the athletes throughout the decades that I've personally taken and now in that library.
That's wonderful. I love it. We'll have to pick that up. So is there anything else you wanted to talk about this morning that we haven't touched on?
Well, I just wanted to encourage people to look at their EAPs. They're employed, look at their EAP at their work. So many companies have them, and people do not realize, a lot of times you get told, we have an EAP when you're coming in and being thrown of 18,000 things where you got to learn about the company and your job and check all the benefits. And I need this for retirement and health choices and healthcare. Usually that's the only time they are told about their EAPs. So check with your HR people, check with your corporate support people, and see if they have an EAP. And if you need them, please go use them because they are there to support you. Additionally, there's great resources, National Association of Mental Illness, NAMI. I'd like to throw a shout out to. They have a lot of great resources, and they have a helpline, as I mentioned. If in crisis, 988 is available 24 hours a day. Mm-hmm. Please spread the word. A lot of advocacy went into moving that away from 911 because mental health is not always the same as I have a crisis at home, but it's specific for mental health. So we want to encourage people to listen for that. And then the other thing I want to encourage is NCAA Gymnastics is just such a wonderful thing, and they need people to come out and support your local team so that we don't lose a great revenue opportunity for college for women in sports. It's lots of fun. Most places have free to low cost tickets. There's a few places, like in LSU that's selling out in Alabama, but most universities, it's free to low cost. So come out, support your local university program. You can Google it for finding out gymnastics in your local area, and support kids that are really amazing and have worked over a decade to get to that point.
I love that. And I think that's a spectacular place to stop for today. So, Julie, I thank you for your time. And that's a wrap for this episode of Legacy Unscripted. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't just let it sit. Take action today to build your future. Make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who may need to hear it. And if you've got a story to share or you want to connect, you know where to find me. Until next time, keep it real, keep it bold, and keep living your legacy.